Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. Big week. Okay. First of all, happy Easter. Second of all, there will not be a show on Monday, but I will be back next Wednesday. There is also a new Substack up on the americanclassroom.substack.com titled Recognizing the Con Inc. Grift, that the documentary Project Whistleblower was another litmus test and it exposed the grifters and their media accomplices once again. I highly recommend bouncing over there and checking that out if you can. Again, it's a lot of dots that I've connected here on the show before, but I just wanted to get it out on Substack also. And again, I highly recommend watching Project Whistleblower if you haven't already. This right here is really bumping up against something that is going to continue to be a problem. And frankly, it's a pattern that I wish more people would recognize. I know a great deal of us recognize this, but, again, the individuals in the so-called truth movement, as they like to call it, they're having a real hard time with things like this. They're having a hard time sucking up to the very groups of people that are actually taking advantage of numerous individuals. And again, making money off of it like some leech on a constant basis. And they don't want to call these people out, and unfortunately, the bigger problem is they don't want to even look at the proof that these individuals are in fact not who they say they are. Again, when they all travel in the same circles, and they all stand on the same stages, and they're all singing and dancing, and they're all doing the same things all of the time, backing each other's play, retweeting each other's posts, shaking each other's hands, going to the same conferences, it can't get clearer that they are their own gang. Now, just because, again, they wear suits and look a little different and claim to be so-called conservatives doesn't make them good people. They're still in it for the money, unfortunately, like a lot of people are. And again, they rub shoulders with the same kinds of people that the left-wing media rubs shoulders with. And I make one specific connection in the article, again, with a giant family, a Jewish family, as it turns out, that funds basically all sides of the media landscape because they're in it for a profit. I mean, that kind of leads me into this very quickly. Again, it was an observation that I made last week, if not this week, of course. In particular, during an election year, that is, that when you open up your email inbox, you end up getting all these messages and all these calls for donating to so-called conservative individuals or conservative, groups or clubs or whatever you want to call them. The same thing is true not only with Candace Owens and James O'Keefe, but with Riley Gaines, the former University of Kentucky swimmer. Again, same kinds of emails. My name's Riley Gaines, and remember me, I was the one who swam against the guy, and Leah Thomas, and blah, 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 whose name isn't Leah. And I was attacked, and I was this, and I was that. Please donate to me. This person has plenty of money. Riley Gaines doesn't need anybody's money. To even have these emails go out with her face on it and her name is, I think, pathetic and disgusting. Again, she's testified in front of Congress at least twice, from my recollection, certainly once, maybe twice or more. And again, continuing to tell the exact same story over and over and over again. I mean, we get it. We understand. She's sued people for defamation. She's won. They've settled out of court. She has plenty of money. So stop grifting off of the one thing that you did a long time ago that happened to be a complete accident, and it wasn't just you. I mean, it was lots of women. And I understand again that she's also in a class action lawsuit. That's great, and I hope they win. But at the exact same time, people have to understand that it's the likes of her that they specifically selected, and by they I mean the Jewish lobby, specifically selected her to be the poster child for something that they and their lawyers could piggyback on in order to make money off of her and her experience. So she's being used. I mean, she was used once by the Thomas dude who was swimming against her. She was used by the University of Kentucky. She was used by the NCAA. And now she's being used by lawyers and being used, of course, by congressmen to basically say, well, I talked with Riley Gaines and she's a hero. Well, great. Good for all of that. Just stop emailing people in these giant cluster emails that get sent out to people where you're begging for money. It's a bad look. It looks terrible. But, it's an election year, and I guess they think everybody just has deep pockets all of the time, and we're just going to say, you know what? I agree with them. Here's a bunch of money. It's just tasteless. That's my take. Again, people might disagree, but she doesn't need our money to fight anything. She doesn't need our money to support her for anything. She has plenty. She can support herself. Again, it's no real ill will. I just think that she's young and she's being taken advantage of, and she either doesn't know it or she, doesn't care or something. But again, going along with it is problematic, and allowing those emails to go out to people, like I said, is a bad look. But anyway, that's my take on it. What else? Geez, let's see. Sean Diddy Combs, or Diddle, as I like to call him. Sean Diddle Combs, or is it Puffy Diddle? I don't know how you say these stupid names. Either way, he's a child trafficker. Pretty evident that that's the case, allegedly, although not surprising. Came across a video, too, of him just the other day. Don't know how old the video is, but it's him and another guy, and then this Jewish teenage girl with a last name Cohen, and he's openly talking about how he just adopted this girl. Because that's normal. Just randomly adopting a teenage Jewish girl while you're, being accused of being a child trafficker, a rapist, a rampant homosexual, and 1,000 other things. Completely normal, I'm sure. Either way, I hope the government seizes everything that he has, arrest everybody he's affiliated with, and you know that list is long and endless. You know it's long and endless. We're not talking about just Hollywood here. We're not talking about the music industry. This goes right into politics. This goes deeper than you can possibly imagine. And oh, by the way, isn't this interesting? It directly correlates with endless Q posts. Isn't that funny? Rachel Chandler was mentioned in endless Q posts, pictures of Sean Combs and Eminem and the Olsen twins, at least one of the Olsen twins, all hanging out with Rachel Chandler, who are all associated with one another. I'm sure it's just an accident and a giant coincidence. See, this, again, I gotta tell you, this continues to be the rub with the people that make fun of the Q posts and the people that dismiss it. Even the likes of Alex Jones calling the Q post CIA. That couldn't be further from the truth. Why would they out themselves like that? If they were CIA, if the Q posts were devised and put together and then dispersed by the CIA, why would they out their own programs, their own people, their own operations, and 1,000 other things? It's beyond absurd. Again, just get into the Q posts and in the search box on Operation Q or QAnon.pub or any of those websites where you can find all those Q posts in chronological order. Type in Rachel Chandler. Type in the actual dates when major news like this breaks. Go back to March 20th. Type in MAR and then space and then the number 20 and hit return and watch what pops up. What was it? The 25th was the beginning of this week. Type in the 25th, MAR25, and then hit return and watch all the posts that pop up. It's everything that's going on right now. This is not an accident. This is a huge on purpose. So again, the more that people are dismissive of those Q posts and the more that they make fun of them and the more that they say, oh, trust the plan, that doesn't mean anything and blah, blah, blah. These are just people that didn't read it when they were coming out. These are the same people, again, that didn't pay attention to it at the time in real time. But those of us who are out here, we did. And we knew that this was bigger than anything that we were even looking at face value. Again, we were reading those posts and going, uh-oh, there are some dots and lines being connected here that are a big, big deal. And these chickens are going to come home to roost. And some of them came home to roost in real time as those Q drops were dropping. And at the exact same time, now years later, they're still coming home to roost. This is a huge deal, and it's unavoidable. So again, much like the Con Inc. grift, there is a cognitive dissonance grift that also exists, which again has to do with dismissing the Q posts, because these people that are reporting on these kinds of issues, while dismissing the Q posts, are almost taking credit for knowing about some of this. before those Q drops occurred. I didn't know about a lot of this stuff before those Q drops. I knew about some of it, but certainly not all of it, and certainly not the depth that we're witnessing now. So again, that's part of the dismissal of those Q posts. It's basically in this pathetic attempt to draw people towards someone's program or someone's broadcast or someone's show, and essentially say, well, I had it all figured out. I've always had this all figured out. I've always known this. Bullshit. Chances are they learned it from the Q post. They just don't want to admit it. Same thing with the Baltimore bridge collapse. I mean, Baltimore was brought up in the Q posts also. Go onto the Q boards and type in the search box Baltimore. Watch what pops up. Has to do with Obama giving them a boatload of money, $1.3, $1.6 billion for this program or that program or this government subsidy or whatever it was. Again, it's interesting because the timing is interesting. The names are interesting. The connections that are being made are interesting. It's not an accident. This is another thing, too. It kind of grinds my gears. And again, no ill will toward this person, but I just find this fascinating because these are, again, part of the con Inc. Gatekeepers, basically. These are the same kinds of people that will put out a tweet and basically say, pay attention to me, I've got it all figured out, I have a pretty good idea as to what's happening. So they get to speculate if you're playing in the con Inc. game, but we don't get to speculate. You see this, this divide and this difference that exists? They're allowed to speculate as the day is long, but we can't. You had Laura Logan out there the other day, who, by the way, is a reformed leftist who worked for 60 Minutes for a very long time. And now, of course, over the last recent few years, she's come out and she even mentioned Q posts a very long time ago. She doesn't talk about it now. She wouldn't be caught dead talking about it now. But she brought it up occasionally back in the day and found it very fascinating and knew that this was a real deal. And now all of a sudden this bridge collapse happens and she puts out this huge tweet where she sounds like a structural engineer. And I'm saying to myself, what is she saying that people can't think about on their own? People already know that, yeah, sure, it was a cyber attack. We saw the video. The lights all went out on the entire boat. The entire thing was either remote controlled or somebody behind the wheel knew exactly what they were doing. Or again, who's to really say? Were there multiple explosions on the bridges or weren't there? It almost doesn't matter the details. What matters is that it's proven that it doesn't take a whole lot to destroy something in our country, to close down transportation, commerce, the economy, and a number of other different things. And then, of course, when Joe Biden swoops in and says, don't worry, we're going to take care of it. We're going to pay for it. When clearly the insurance company for the boat is typically the entity that's supposed to take care of it. Because that's the process in a situation like this. There's an investigation. There's an insurance claim, and then the insurance company pays for it, pays for all of the damage. Again, was there a catastrophic technical failure? This is what an investigation would have to uncover. But just like that, as fast as the bridge came down, the entire story is practically gone. Just like that. Because don't worry, Joe Biden swooped in and said he's going to take care of it. Honest to Christ, it's like the mafia comes in over a bunch of dead bodies that they've just killed, and they go, don't worry, we'll take care of this. And everybody goes, okay, no problem. They did it. They did it. This was done by our own government. This wasn't a diversity, equity, and inclusion hire that fell asleep at the wheel and just so happened to hit that bridge at the exact right place at the exact right time. This was a giant on purpose too, and I think everybody understands that, but we don't need the likes of Laura Logan to explain it to people. And then she goes on Charlie Kirk and Gateway Pundit, and she's bouncing around, and they're going, oh, you went viral with a tweet. Who cares? We have eyeballs, we can see it, we know what's going on. It's government. They're attacking us because they hate us and they want us dead. It's pretty straightforward. So anyway, that's my rant on those recent events. There's this too, again. Things aren't changing, certainly when it comes to the election. This is from The Hill, which, by the way, is not a conservative outlet by any stretch of the imagination. This was titled, Arizona Becomes Ground Zero for the 2024 Election Misinformation Fears. Interesting way of titling that. It says law enforcement officials are taking steps to put up guardrails ahead of the 2024 elections, where long festering misinformation from 2020 is expected to heighten tensions, especially in the battleground state of Arizona. Election workers and public officials in Arizona have been plagued by incessant threats and harassment, while candidates with a penchant for conspiracy theories have made the state a hotbed of misinformation. The U.S. Attorney Gary Restiano, if I'm saying that right, Arizona's top federal prosecutor, said Monday that threats against election officials in the swing state make up more than 1/3 of all cases tied to federal election threats nationwide, and an even greater number of threats aren't prosecuted. Well, why is that? Why is that? And why all of a sudden are they threats? Maybe they're just a question. You know, maybe it's just an inquiry. Maybe somebody says, hey, Sheriff's Department, what exactly are you doing to make sure that the vote tabulation machines that we have to run our paper ballots through actually count this time? Because you may recall, 2 years ago, they just randomly stopped counting. And oops, they just broke. And then all hell broke loose and an election was stolen. By not that many votes. Again, this is a big, big problem. And you've heard me say it on the show here before, and you've thought it too, and everybody's said it, and we all know it. All you have to do is spike one of those voter tabulation machines, and then whoops-a-daisy, your votes aren't counted. So then they just put the ballot into that magical trash can, and they say, don't worry, we'll count it later. You can go home and go about your business. This is what's going to happen. They're going to do this again. And again, people asking questions to these so-called law enforcement individuals who, let's face it, they're out to lunch on just about every issue. And I mean every issue. These people are not in a position to actually do anything. They're not going to do anything. Again, in those Q posts, when they stated military is the only way, they weren't kidding. We are seeing how corrupt and how brainwashed everybody is. From your average citizen who still wears a mask in a grocery store, which, by the way, I mean, holy hell. I was in a grocery store the other day. It's an international grocery store around where I live, about 30 minutes away. It's a great place. I mean, they have literally everything you could possibly imagine. If you want to buy a whole shark to eat, they have those. It's incredible. Either way, the number of people still wearing masks is so sad. But that's the base level, and you know, a lot of them unfortunately are these elderly couples, and you just feel terrible for them because again, I walk past these people and I always think to myself, what is it that they think when they look at us not wearing a mask? Again, I know I've been over this before, but what is it that they are thinking about us? Because when we look at them, I'm thinking to myself, they're at least double, if not triple or quadruple jabbed. I'm shocked they're still alive. They're gasping for air. They're walking around slower than they would if they were actually breathing real air instead of gagging themselves. And then I think to myself, what is it that they think they have figured out that we don't? What makes them smarter than us? Which then, of course, begs the question when they look at us, like I said earlier, what do they think when they look at us? Do they think, well, they don't know what they're doing and they're putting themselves in harm's way or they're potentially harming us? I mean, honest to God, that's the most base level brainwashing that we can visually see. The problem is that the higher up you go in so-called law enforcement and the judiciary, and then, of course, election officials and 1,000 other things, they're all brainwashed too, with the occasional sprinkling of people who are actually intentionally trying to ruin things in our country. Again, I can send all the evidence I want to Sheriff Richard Jones in Butler County, Ohio. my county, my sheriff, and tell him you have a job to do here regarding a biological weapon that's on the loose and has been for the last 3.5 years. It's time for you to do something about this. He's not going to touch it. He won't touch it because it always bumps up against everyone's cognitive dissonance. And then their default setting, as you just heard here in the Hill article, is, of course, to call us all conspiracy theorists, or that we are, terrorizing people with phone calls and questions. Give me a break. It's not going to get better. I'm telling you, this is going to be some interesting stuff coming forward. It really is. It's going to be a head scratcher all summer long. Everybody's just going to be scratching their heads going, what's going on? What's coming? It's going to be wild. Okay. Education stuff, and boy, do I have a bunch. First of all, let me start with this. This was delightful that I finally came across this again. I've put this meme out on my Gab before, but I couldn't find it. And I've put this meme out on war videos before, and I couldn't find it. But I finally found it. It showed up again online, and I again downloaded it, and there you have it. So I'm going to put this out on Gab again, I think. Anyway, what it describes, of course, is it's 2 separate columns, and it has, again, a lot to do with the homosexual population and sexual partners and alcoholism and how they're all connected. So, ironically enough, I got a text message from an individual who works at a university who sends me information and will hopefully be on the show soon, certainly at the end of the semester. And they sent me this email that they received talking about this pride dance, or I think they call it pride prom. So it's for the university students who are gay, basically. And it's some dance from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And they just texted me and they said they can't wait to get out, that the end of the school year can't come fast enough. And I said, well, send them this meme if you want. This will stir the pot. So here's what the meme says. Again, it's 2 separate columns, and it just bounces back and forth with all of these sourced statistics. So the theme of it is nothing to be proud of, and it's got rainbows everywhere and a bunch of people holding the different kinds of flags and whatever else. So here's what it says. It says, quote, again, every statistic is sourced in this meme. It says 58% of homosexuals have problems with intestinal worms. 1 in 15 homosexuals is a pedophile. 33% of homosexuals have problems with alcoholism. On average, a gay man has up to 80 sexual partners per year, and on average, a total of 1,000 over a lifetime. On average, a straight man has 8 sexual partners in his lifetime. It says perfect correlation between childhood rape and homosexual behavior. 47% of gays admit to having been raped by an adult man during their childhood or adolescence. It says homosexuals represent 2% of the world's population, but they represent 33% of pedophile rapists. Nothing to be proud of, as it continues. It says 78% of homosexuals have STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. 23% of children with lesbian parents have been sexually abused. Homosexuals represent 2% of the world's population, but they represent 67% of AIDS patients. And finally, 51% of cases of domestic violence occur in same-sex couples. Unquote. Interesting. Now I wonder what the statistics are for those who pretend to be a gender that they are not, or a sex that they are not. I'm sure it's not better. So again, just keep that in mind, that every single time a school or school employee decides to wave the rainbow flag, or stick it on their door, or wherever they may hang it, or whatever they may do with it, that's what they're supporting. That's what they're supporting. And ultimately, of course, they're supporting the increased risk of suicide. Because as we know, that's the end game to all of these misdirected feelings and abuse and 1,000 other things. That's what they're supporting. And who supports that? You guessed it, Jill Biden, because this happened earlier this week. Joe Biden compares being against gay porn books in schools to Nazism, quote unquote. Oh, what a history lesson. What a history lesson. She actually inadvertently just taught everybody about the Weimar Republic before Adolf Hitler showed up and cleaned out all the weirdos. Amazing. She got her timeline off a little bit. It's beyond ridiculous. Again, and at the top of her speech, when she made this comment, she goes, someone told me that Berlin was the capital of freedom, so to speak, and when in fact, of course, back then in the 1920s and before Adolf Hitler showed up, it was the capital of degeneracy, crime, drugs, sexual perversion, and 1,000 other things. But don't worry, this is her definition of freedom. That leads me to this too. Again, more gay nonsense in American schools and more brainwashing. And this should show people again that these parents are so brainwashed that they would quite literally show up to a school when it's burned to the ground in an effort to have the ashes of the school teach their children that that's how dependent they are on these environments, specifically government. This comes from CaliforniaFamily.org, and it's titled here, Cease and Desist Letter Issued Over School's Secret Elementary LGBTQ Clubs. So parents got together with a group of lawyers, put together a cease and desist letter and basically said, please school, stop being gay. Stop doing all the gay stuff you're doing and please cut it out. Not knowing that even if they cut it out, the people who still agree with all of it are still there. And yet, the parents that keep sending their children there, even if the school were to actually cease and desist, they'd still send them there and then blindly believe within their own brainwashed minds that they've somehow struck up a victory against the school district and yay, we won this battle, even though they keep sending their children to the same environment. This again just exemplifies the hook in the back of these brainwashed parents. They scream, yell, and shout, and then they just keep sending their kids no matter what. It says a legal challenge on behalf of parents has been issued to Elk Grove Unified School District, EGUSD, concerning at least 6 LGBTQ lunchtime clubs the district is facilitating in elementary schools. Now again, I've been over this story before, but watch out, they sent a cease and desist letter, so now things are really going to change. Again, even if they comply, the parents are still going to send their kids there. That's the biggest problem. What you have to do is you have to give these degenerates no more environment to go. You have to rip the rug out from underneath them. You have to take the roof off of their head. And the way that you do that is by not going anymore. That's it. That's the only solution. I've beat this dead horse 1,000,000 times. I'm going to keep beating it. If people don't leave permanently, and all you do is keep engaging in these spats back and forth and yelling at school board meetings and sending cease and desist letters and threatening to sue people and 1,000 other things, you're taking all of that energy and you're wasting it. They're just spending all of that energy assuming that, again, government is going to stop spinning its gears when it will never stop spinning its gears. The only way that the factory of government shuts down is if people stop participating in government. That's it. It is quite literally the only solution. So again, none of this back-patting stuff, which I'm sure they'll engage in. We sent a cease and desist letter. Yeah, we did it. You didn't do anything. You're just lying to yourselves. The problem is way deeper than what these parents can possibly imagine. Case in point, there's this. Cicely sent me this one from the New York Post. Minnesota University's George Floyd Scholarship, exclusively for black students, sparks discrimination complaints. Yes, that's right. A Minnesota university apparently has a George Floyd Scholarship. This is a real thing. This is real. A Minnesota college, it says, scholarship named after George Floyd and only available to black students sparked a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education as one critic called it racism. It says North Central University's exclusion of non-black students is, quote, insidious discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin. It says original, but I think they meant origin. Anyway, it says, according to the complaint from the conservative legal advocate group, the Equal Protection Project, of the Legal Insurrection Foundation. Quote, discrimination against white applicants is just as unlawful as discrimination against black or other non-white applicants. Foundation President William Jacobson and project member Amir Bino wrote in the complaint filed with the DOE Office of Civil Rights. Yes, I'm sure the Department of Education is going to respond in kind and actually do the right thing. It says Jacobson, a Cornell law professor and founder of the project, said in a statement to the Post that the 2020 death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police sparked a focus of alleged systemic racism on campuses across the United States. And unfortunately, colleges have believed this lie because the fact is Derek Chauvin didn't kill George Floyd. George Floyd swallowed a boatload of fentanyl, just enough to kill him. And there you go. I'm telling you, scholarships for murderers, well, he wasn't a murderer, at least not that I know of, but he was certainly an attempted murderer and a kidnapper and a physical assaulter, a batterer, a drug addict, used counterfeit money. He was a felon, for God's sakes. I mean, what next? The Jeffrey Dahmer scholarship for kids? Is that what we can expect next? These people don't think. A few more education stories here. This came from Breitbart. Democrat North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Extreme GOP, he says, superintendent candidate homeschools all of her children. This is apparently a bad thing, according to him. It says on Tuesday's broadcast of MSNBC's The Last Word, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Democrat, stated that the Republican candidate for superintendent of the state's schools, Michelle Morrow, is part of a extreme, quote-unquote, group of Republican candidates running statewide in the state of North Carolina, and one example of Morrow's extremism is the fact that she homeschools all of her children. Yes, that's right. Everybody who homeschools their kids is an extremist, according to government. The battle lines can't get clearer here. This is what they think of you. If you send your children to school, you are their slave. You are government slave. But if you leave the plantation, you are no longer their slave. They just name call you because that's all they have. He says Cooper said that the Republicans are, quote, going for power and they're not paying attention to the real issues that are facing the people of North Carolina and the people across this country. So we're going to work very hard. I think the road to the presidency runs through North Carolina, he says. And when you look at our statewide candidates, they've nominated people like Mark Robinson, like Representative Dan Bishop for Attorney General, who's in Congress now and part of the Boebert Gates Marjorie Taylor Greene cabal. They've nominated someone for superintendent of public schools in North Carolina who believes that teachers ought to have guns in the classroom, who homeschools all of her children and took them to January 6th at the Capitol. That is the kind of extreme Republican lineup that's in North Carolina. Well, I think at this point, anything is better than Roy Cooper. I think that's pretty clear. I don't know what else to say other than this. I would certainly like to see and hear a state superintendent not only clean house, which I think is next to impossible, because at some point they're going to bump up against the Jewish lobby who's going to do whatever they have to do to cut them down. But I would like a state superintendent to actually emphasize the fact that their position is a useless position. I would like them in their position that is useless. I would like them to advocate for homeschooling. I would like them to actually teach the public, the brainwashed public, about what government has been doing to their children and their families as a whole. And that how when your child is old enough to read and write, they can teach themselves. And if you parent them correctly, they can take care of themselves in their home environment by themselves while they are learning in an online environment, and then learning, doing other things, of course, throughout the course of a day, and certainly on a weekend when mom and or dad or both are home. And then they can go out and do other things and learn other things. I would like someone in some position higher up to actually do that, because I've asked this question before, and certainly on Gab, which is, when was the last time a large voice in the field of so-called education, certainly not a politician, but when has any large voice in the field of education, so they think, actually advocated for homeschooling? How about Chaya Ratchik and Libs of TikTok? I mean, she's busy putting out all of these tweets on X, I guess, posts on X, however you want to phrase it, about, again, all of the degenerates that exist within school environments. But is she actually spending any time teaching people about the actual psychological makeup of the environment of what has to happen within a home learning environment in the home, and how that can actually be accomplished? When was the last time she advocated for homeschooling? I know there are a lot of people who do, and a lot of people, again, have never been school teachers before, and that's fantastic. But I would like to hear at least a few politicians bring it up, instead of course, just bringing it up when it comes to the defense of homeschooling and government coming after homeschoolers. How about you get out in front of it for once? Again, the only time that we really hear politicians bring up homeschoolers is when government, them, is attacking homeschoolers. Then that's when you see the so-called division line. But again, there's no congressional hearing on homeschooling and the importance of homeschooling and what it's been proven to do. Certainly not anyway from a historic standpoint. I mean, they're not going to bring up the fact that this is exactly how families used to operate in America. There were no quote-unquote schools or school districts or school systems. And people, again, back in the day could actually understand English, speak it correctly, write it correctly, and do a number of other things far better than what we're doing today. And they did it without the school system. But again, they're not going to bring any of that up, certainly not as a government entity, because they don't want the cat out of the bag. These individuals are still getting kickbacks from a number of different avenues. And again, if it's the Jewish lobby, then what are they doing? Well, they're funding all sides. They're paying people and funding their campaigns so that they keep their mouths closed about issues like this. And then the exact same time, that same lobby is funding the destruction. They just have to perpetuate the problem. That's all. And you know that. You all know that. They have to perpetuate the problem, and one of the ways that they perpetuate it is by not talking about it. They can't actually bring up the actual solution. Because if they did, again, then the grift is over. It all goes away. It's beyond sad. Either way, I got this too. Here's another reason to homeschool, by the way. I got this email from a listener. They've contributed a great deal of information over the years, and they too homeschool their children. They said the following. They said, "Hey, Sean, quick story. The pediatricians are now recommending cholesterol blood work for kids as young as 11. We had to bring our daughters in for a physical to attend gymnastics camp, and it was strongly recommended. Sounds like their way of trying to look proactive in explaining heart complications with young kids. Could only find the below article online, which does mention 11-year-olds. Strange times." And this particular article, again, came from the San Diego Union Tribune. The article was titled, "It's Time to Get Your Cholesterol in Check." Again, 11-year-olds in cholesterol, and then, of course, the backdoor explanation of heart trouble, and tying that in with the jab effects. And, well, the reason that Becky fell over during gymnastics camp or basketball camp is because of their high cholesterol levels. Don't pay attention to the fact that they were jabbed with a biological weapon. No. It's high cholesterol. I mean, there's so many lies in this. It's amazing. Again, they want to increase everybody's health insurance costs. That's one avenue. Yes, they certainly want to make excuses for why people are falling over and blame it on cholesterol. But cholesterol is not bad. We need cholesterol. It's a good thing. That's one of the largest dietary lies that exists out there. Oh my gosh, your cholesterol numbers are too high. So what? So what? Does a person exercise? Do they eat right? Then they're fine. They don't need government measuring what's going on allegedly inside of their body to then, of course, fearmonger and scare everybody into believing that something terrible is happening. And oh, again, by the way, when Becky and Jimmy fall over during basketball camp or any other sport that they're playing, it must be cholesterol, and we're seeing a rise in this. It's premeditated murder, and the premeditation is coming from the fact that they're writing these scripts as they go along to try to justify why students and young kids are falling over dead. It's absolutely amazing. But they're just going to keep it up. They're going to keep doing it. There's this too, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this because again, this is one of those things I just continue to find fascinating. The fact that people cannot connect the dots here. They've been jabbed, they're ill, and they don't know why. And then they take to social media, in particular, in this case, Reddit, which of course is a cesspool of brainwashing. And they will read the comments from these people and not make the connections. And what's interesting about Reddit too, is when a person makes a post, what they can do is they can actually sort the comments by the categories of top, and then there's best, which they have in parentheses suggested, and then they have them broken down by the category of new, controversial, old, and then Q&A. So I'm going to read some of these, and I'm going to read the initial post here first. This is amazing. I find this just amazing. And it's going to continue to be amazing, again, until a levee breaks with these individuals and the flood of the truth just overwhelms them. I mean, God only knows what's going to happen then. But here's what this post was titled, and this was from 4 days ago. It's titled, "Is anyone else's immune system totally shot since the COVID era?" quote unquote. They said, quote, "I'm a younger millennial, 28 female. I've never been sick as much as I have been in the past 6 months. I used to get sick every other year or every year, but in the past 6 months I have gotten COVID at Christmas, gotten a nasty fever illness coming back from back-to-back work trips in January, February, and now I'm sick yet again after coming back from vacation in California. It feels like I literally cannot get on a plane without getting sick, which has never really been a problem for me. Has anyone else had a similar experience?" Then they wrote, edit. This got a lot more traction than I thought it would. To answer a few recurring questions themes, I am generally very healthy, I exercise, eat nutrient-rich food, don't smoke, etc. I did not wear a mask on my flights these last few go-arounds, since I had been free of any illness, riding public transit to work and going to concerts over the past year plus. But at least 4 flights, it's back to mask for me. I have all my boosters and flu vaccines up to date. And then they put edit 2. Vaccines are safe and effective. I regret this has become such a hotbed for vaccine conspiracy theories. Unquote. You just, you can't. These people, they're doubling down on their dismissiveness. They're doubling down on the thing that they think is real that isn't. They're doubling down on their own rationalization. You've heard me say it a million times. These are not survivable characteristics of a human. You can't be this way and survive in the world. You just can't. Honestly. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do first. I've categorized these comments from, let's see, from top to bottom. So this particular post received, this woman's post received 6,492 likes. with 4,089 comments. Yeah, no kidding. And then the top comments. I'm gonna read them right now. At least some of them. This first one is the very top comment with 429 points from 4 days ago. This person said, quote, in response, "My body is weak as shit now. It's respiratory hell. My theory is that COVID is bad for you and all the other illnesses just jumped on the bandwagon." Yes, that's right, because that's how that works. Honestly. The next one says, and this was in response to that person, they said COVID also reactivates many dormant viruses and bacteria, Lyme, shingles, enteroviruses, all types of herpes viruses, including the common ones like HHV6, EBV, and CMV. Dormant viruses like these are part of the source of many illnesses and conditions. COVID is so much more complicated than people give it credit for, and I could talk about it all day. Oh, I'm sure you could. They go on, unfortunately. They said multiple friends, even at my age, 21, are getting sick and getting put out of work and school. I've been sick for 4 years and I'm getting worse, trending toward bedbound, housebound. You're going to die because you have AIDS. Unbelievable. The next person responded to that person. They said, I've seen COVID described as a mass disabling event, quote unquote. And even though it's largely been ignored or downplayed, it does feel like in 5 to 10 years, younger and younger people are just going to get worse and worse. The society and general healthcare systems are not set up to support disabled people as is. Then let's add thousands more and add on some gaslighting, telling them all it's in their head. Stop being babies, overdramatic, etc. I just don't see things getting better on this front. It's depressing. Yeah, because you have AIDS. The next one says COVID is a multi-system inflammatory disease. No, it isn't. There is no COVID. But AIDS is. And the shots, of course, cause it. If you get into the blood, it can attack pretty much any organ system in the body. My hospital has a long COVID clinic. The wait time is months just to be seen, they said. What scares me is the kids. MSI disease is extremely bad for growing kids, so many people wanted kids back in school without precautions because the mortality rate was so low. But as this generation of kids grows up over the next 15 to 20 years, I'm afraid we're going to see a wave of health issues in them. When you're moving toward a time of top-heavy population and fewer workers, disabling a large number of workers who will take your place is an awful strategy. Yeah. It seems like a couple of dots are starting to get connected with that person. Here's another one. They said, I wonder if that's why teachers are struggling so much with their students this year. Could brain inflammation cause personality changes? Do we know if COVID can pass the brain-blood barrier? I'm going to look that up. And then they wrote, edit. COVID appears to make the blood-brain barrier more permeable. That's discomforting. And then they have a ncbi.nlm.nih.gov link. No, it's not COVID. It's the shots you took. But don't worry, at least you're up to date, so I'm sure you'll be fine. Unbelievable. There's one more here I'll read. They said, we know that COVID can have lasting impacts on the brain from temporary brain fog, quote unquote, and memory issues to resembling a minor TBI, which is a stroke. Absolutely incredible. So now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the comments and I'm going to sort them by clicking on controversial first. Here's the highest rated controversial post, and it only has 12 upvotes. They said, quote, If you have taken the COVID vaccine and your particular batch isn't a placebo, your immune system will be reek with a grab bag of horrible adverse effects that range from ADE and Bell's palsy to cancer and myocarditis. Yeah. Yep. Then a person responded and said, Bell's palsy, definitely get your health advice from this individual. And then a bunch of deleted posts under that, because again, what'll happen is people will, it's hilarious. People will comment and then they'll actually look it up and then they'll find out that the person was right. And then they go back into the comments and they delete their initial post because they go, oh shit, this person was right. So they don't want to look like they don't know what they're talking about. Another person responded and said, hey, yeah, I got the vaccine shot, and 2 weeks later my car blew a tire. Damn vaccines. So that person's a fool. They said more like, quote, I got injected with a brand new pharmaceutical product based on a never before deployed in humans medical technology that's meant to interface with my immune system, and now my immune system seems to be behaving differently, unquote. Yeah. Yep. Another person said they tested it for 12 weeks. It's totally safe and effective, bruh. No. Another person said, nah, that's just you. Another person said, sure, seems like it's not. Another person said anecdotal evidence is low quality evidence. There's nothing to indicate our immune systems are weaker. It's a ridiculous sentiment, frankly. You can see the back and forth here. I mean, it's incredible. These people get on these chat boards and they argue about things they know nothing about. Another person said it is the vaccines. Injecting yourself with foreign substances is the most likely cause to your ailments. I have not been sick in years and have not received any shots since they were mandatory in school. I travel for work. Another person responded and said same. Refused vaxxed. 63 and feeling fine for years. Another person said, I got 2 COVID shots and I still haven't had COVID. I also haven't been sick since 2018, and that was just a cold. I'm a teacher, so I'm exposed to all kinds of people every day. Your point? Another person then responded to them and said, why did you stop with 2 shots? The science states that you should be around number 6 or 7 by now. Another person said, yes, but didn't you receive the $20 gift card to your local establishment? Again, the arguing, the back and forth, and the cognitive dissonance is alarming. And this right here is exactly how you destroy a country. Mass confusion over something that can't be more simple at face value. And again, just to kind of elaborate, I would put it this way. It's not really an elaboration, frankly. It's just hypnosis. It's beyond hypnosis. An individual, again, goes to Reddit to either vent and or explain something that they can't seem to understand. The very fact that they're openly stating in their post that they can't seem to understand what's going on implies that they want to understand. They want an answer. And then what is that individual likely to believe based on all of the thousands of posts that come in? Because they're hypnotized already, they're likely to believe the most upvoted posts as opposed to the quote-unquote controversial post that only has 12 upvotes when the so-called best post or most popular post has over 500 upvotes. See, that's the hypnosis. It's almost numerical hypnosis because they're looking at the numbers and saying to themselves, well, this has the highest amount of agreement, so this answer must be correct. This must be the reason for why I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing. When in fact, the exact opposite. The upvoted with only 12 upvotes under the controversial tab, that's actually the one that possesses the answer. Where they simply said, it's the shots you took. It's the shots you keep taking. This has damaged your DNA. That's why you're consistently sick, which by definition, I'll add on to it, is of course the definition of AIDS. You have a compromised immune system permanently, ergo, you have a litany of syndromes and illnesses that you're experiencing over the course of time. And as you've heard me say again, the human body is like a punching bag. If it consistently gets punched, eventually it will start to wear itself away, and then it will start to leak. And then the stuffing comes out, and then it's no longer a punching bag anymore. And then you end up with so many health problems that you can't possibly manage it because your body is tired of being punched. And unfortunately, these biological weapons, of course, have tricked our bodies into, well, not mine, but, human bodies, into ultimately punching itself time and time again and turning the gloves, instead of outward, it turns the gloves inward. And it just beats itself literally to death. The human body is resilient, but it is not that resilient. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here's what I'm going to do. Just very quickly, again, just to kind of wrap up here, a couple of house cleaning things, so to speak. On my website, AmericanEducationFM.com, I have a number of free books that anybody can read and download for free if they are interested. Under the Education Documents tab, there is a PDF there of 100 free PDFs and 100 free books. That, again, I haven't read all of them, clearly. But it was a giant list that I came across a while ago. I went through it very quickly, and I thought, oh yeah, this is certainly for this audience, and it's certainly very interesting. If you're interested in downloading that giant list, by all means, please do so. I also have, below that, 2 separate books on the Education Documents tab, one of which I've referenced with regularity, which is the Leipzig Connection. I highly recommend checking this book out. Again, I fully understand that there's lots of books out there on education, and unfortunately, there are a number of individuals who continuously just rewrite these books on education and communism in education and how it's destroying children and 1,000 other things. These books have already been written, and they already exist. So, well, and I should say this, a great deal of them, of course, are free. And the Leipzig Connection, in my personal opinion, is one of the better ones. It names names, it goes way back. It brings up the Jewish lobby, the control of American education, and certainly European education. And it gets into, again, the psychologists that have basically created the entire foundation of the brainwashing that we see today. And again, this book was written back in the 70s. So, with that said, again, the Leipzig Connection is available for free in PDF under the Education Documents tab of my website. Below that, I also have Florence Nightingale's book, Notes on Nursing, What It Is and What It Is Not. I highly recommend downloading that also and giving that a read. It really is fascinating. You can also listen to Florence Nightingale's book on YouTube, and just type in Florence Nightingale audiobook, and it'll be the first one that pops up. It's about 3.5 hours long, I'd say, if you want to listen to it on audio. Again, Florence Nightingale knew that viruses did not exist. She knew that they were fake. And as you'll hear very quickly, certainly at the beginning of her book, she goes through it very fast, that it has to do with the absence of what the body is not receiving, such as sunlight, fresh air, clean sheets, clean clothes, moving around, exercising, grounding yourself, a number of things. It's very common sense stuff. But she, of course, also calls out the nursing profession and says one of the largest problems, that existed certainly back then in the 1800s, mid 1800s, which is when the book was written, I believe 1860. And then, and of course, it's true today, which is that it just has to do with the lack of common sense. It has to do with incompetence. People are just following one another without actually thinking as to whether or not the right thing is actually taking place. That health comes at the end of a needle or in the form of a pill, instead of, again, fresh air, sunlight, warm climate, things of this nature. So that book is also available on my website also. Let's see, what else? I think that's about it. Again, check out the Substack on the americanclassroom.substack.com if you are interested regarding the Con Inc. grift and how to recognize how they get away with what they get away with, and basically the behavioral patterns and the media patterns that they engage in when they're trying to cover for them, for one another and certainly for themselves. It is a reoccurring pattern, and it's not going to stop. These people want to control numerous narratives as much as humanly possible, and again, they don't want us in the mainstream wavelength of thought regarding very serious issues and even the lies that they perpetuate to get out there. Because if they do, then their grift all goes away. And that's the largest problem. And as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't make them any different than any other enemy that we have. If they're censoring the truth, then they are the problem. And if they rationalize their position and say, well, it's not that important, or it doesn't matter, there's more important things to talk about, nonsense. You go after the biggest lies, because once you rip that down, all the small lies that are on top of it fall with it. And that's the way that it has to go. So these people expose themselves on a constant basis all of the time. We just have to keep recognizing them. We have to keep calling them out, and that's just, in my opinion, the way that it has to be. So with that said, again, ladies and gentlemen, there will be no show on Monday, but I will catch everybody again on Wednesday. Happy Easter again. God bless everybody. Take care. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.